Hello everybody, my name is James Davies and welcome to Photo Chat Vlog on YouTube. Now this episode is really some quite random thoughts, but they're an extension to the Series 3 Episode 4 video, which I'll link to below. Now I said in that episode that I didn't have a favourite picture, but on reflection I only realised long after I'd finished the recording and put the video together that actually I did have a favourite picture, and it's this one. It's the colour one taken on 35mm film. Now I said in that video that the reason I was inspired to take those pictures that day was because we were in the cafe and the sun was going down and the quality of the light was what I wanted to capture. But that whole idea that I talked about how knowing that the day is different because of how you perceive the light, it actually has a nostalgic origin for me. And when I was in the cafe, I picked up on what I'm going to call a feeling tone. Now I would once have called that a memory, I would once have called it a vibe or something like that, but basically it is a reminder of a particular point in my life, and on reflection I think when I pulled out the camera I was actually channeling that somehow. Now the point in my life that I'm talking about is actually from when I was about 10 or 11 years old, and what happened was I was at junior school, a big old Victorian school building in my hometown, and we had an after school art club. Now I normally went to school at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I went home at 12 o'clock and had my dinner, and I went back in the afternoon at 1 o'clock, and I came out at 4 o'clock to go home and have my tea at 5 o'clock, and my life was absolutely regimented around those hours. And in fact, it was so regimented that even when it wasn't school, like when it was the holidays, it was still always dinner time at 12 o'clock, and it was still tea time at 5 o'clock. And my whole life between about age 4 and age 11 was ruled by that timetable. But when we were doing the art class, well, I was in school after hours, and the actual building became a different sort of place, because all the other kids had gone home, and we were left behind in school with just one teacher doing this extra after-school art class. And my day took on a different shape as a result, and I can remember it was during the spring, or the start of the summer that year, and I've got this strong memory of being in this strange, quiet version of school and seeing the sun coming through the doors that led to the playground. Now, it's this afternoon and evening sun lighting up the quiet school that stands out for me, a quiet end-of-the-day moment in a place where I wouldn't normally be, and which was normally full of hundreds of kids. And after the classes I would go out into the playground where there were no other kids, and I would go home at a different time. And my normal world was twisted slightly on its axis on those days. Now back in the present time, well there I am in the cafe, with afternoon sun shining in on empty tables and chairs. Now I know this image is not of a school, this is a cafe. But if I think of the things that define a school, well, a defining image of course is tables and chairs. And I'm conscious that these empty tables and empty chairs, well, there's an echo of school in there. So did I want to take a picture of an empty cafe, or was I trying to capture the meaning for me of this afternoon light landing on tables and chairs and an empty building? This is the thing about nostalgia and memories. There are fragments of things that I remember, but they get processed through life as I get older, and they get joined together with other ideas in my mind and in my heart. So the concept of an empty classroom and an empty school on a summery evening now becomes joined together with a cafe that's empty at the same time of day. Now what we ultimately see here is a unifying image for me, one of empty tables and empty chairs that draws out one memory into the present day, and it does make me think if a lot of my photography isn't subconsciously driven by nostalgia. Now I've always struggled with nostalgia. There's actually a whole blog post on my website called Examining the Structure of Nostalgia, where I've attempted to unravel what it is about nostalgia, and the existence of nostalgia across your lifetime. In particular, the experience that nostalgia as a thing is quite profound. It can be powerful, and it makes you think that you're here today in the present, and yet you're suddenly thrown back into the past, and that has to have some kind of meaning. So what I mentioned earlier on were feeling tones, and these are something I've only understood or got to know about in recent years. Now my understanding of feeling tones is that they are a way of explaining how all of the sensory elements of our lives collectively make up a feeling tone. Much like the physical parts of a musical instrument combine with where the instrument is played in order to make up the instrument's tone. So you may or may not know, for example, that the clarinet and the saxophone use the same type of single reed and mouthpiece, but the clarinet has a cylindrical body made of wood, and the saxophone has a conical body made of metal. Now these differences are what make the clarinet sound different to the saxophone, although they have a common origin. If you add to that the difference in sound depending on where the instrument is played, for example in a small room or on an outdoor stage, you can begin to see how the idea of a tone as a collective noun is something made up of many parts. And so it is with feeling tones. We don't just see an image of something with our eyes, we experience that thing alongside all of our other senses, including sounds, scents, temperature, and even somehow understanding time. All of these things come together to make up the feeling tone. And when it comes to a nostalgic recollection of a feeling tone, you may only get one sensory trigger, but from that one sensory cue, and that might be a sound, or it might be a visual, or it might be a scent, but this single cue triggers all sorts of other memories, and you don't just suddenly have that single sensory recollection in your mind. You're actually suddenly remembering how it felt at the time that you're reminded of. So imagine you're somewhere, you're in a cafe and the sun is going down and you're reminded of being at school. But you're not reminded of looking at school and putting that picture in your mind. Your actual whole body is replaying that feeling tone of how you felt at that time. And so if at that time I was 10 years old, I was remembering that little 10-year-old me, that version of me that's stored somewhere deep inside my mind and my body. And when I was taking the picture somewhere, he was saying, "Hey, I'm here. Remember me? Remember that afternoon? I'm still here. And it was just like this. Do you remember?" So there's this idea that you're not just remembering the one sense that triggered off the nostalgia. You're remembering everything. You remember how everything felt. Now, I may have been 10 or 11 at that after-school art class, but as I sit here now, I'm much, much older. I'm 47, and I'm about to turn 48. And as I understand it, or at least as science tells me, all of the cells in my body are replacing themselves. But the idea that despite that, I can actually remember how I felt, that my emotions and sensations are being captured all the time. Even tactile sensations and sonic sensations and visuals, and of course this olfactory sense, the sense of smell. The idea that these are being stored somewhere and they can be recalled is an incredible thing. For so long, I've been thinking that actually a particular song is a stronger memory for me, or a particular scent, or an image is stronger than other ones. But in fact, their strength may not be a distinct, singular thing, but in fact their ability to draw out all the other senses from that moment in time. So with all that going on, it's no surprise that there is very possibly a strong nostalgic drive to my photography, and not always a conscious one. And I just thought it was worth reflecting on this, because as I've said before, we have the technical aspect of the pictures. The camera makes a difference to the image, and the film makes a difference to the image, but the camera and the films can't take any pictures on their own. They need that human being to point the camera in a certain direction, and to press the button at a certain time, and that is an enormous influence on the image. Now, what motivates the photographer is different for every single one of us. And for me, I just wanted to acknowledge that sometimes I'm trying to capture a feeling that is echoed across time. And it's the same feeling, the feeling of the end of the day and the empty building, whether it's this cafe or my old school. What we kind of see is a picture of today, but driven by the past. So if you have any thoughts about my pictures or what I've just said, by all means please leave me a comment. And regardless of whether it is the future, the past or the present in your reality, take care. And I will see you in the next episode of Photo Chat Vlog.